Parmalat used Bank of America and Citigroup to conduct its frauds, to aid and abet its frauds. Parmalat's owner, who was looting Parmalat and causing it to become massively insolvent, and then hiding the money in offshore banks. And Citigroup created an entity to do this, and its Italian name translates to black hole.
Oh my gosh.
Right? But what happened is, in both of the banks' role in the Enron aiding and abetting their frauds and aiding and abetting Parmalat's fraud, is that the Supreme Court ruled that you and I, if we're defrauded, or if our pension fund is defrauded, none of those, us directly or our pension fund, can sue the banks that aided, or the audit firms that aided and abetted the fraud. Only the SEC and the Justice Department can bring actions. And if they're under the control of people that refuse to prosecute the elites, again, the message is you can defraud with effective impunity. And so the banks learned this lesson. Parmalat was essentially 2004 type of thing. Enron goes down in 2001. This is the lead up. This is when they're already helping to hyperinflate the bubble in residential real estate that's going to destroy America, where they're already helping to hyperinflate bubbles in Spain and other countries that are going to cause these crises. So this is where we could have put the shot across the bow and prevented this massive crisis, but they were unwilling to take any action. I told you about the entity that we cracked down on that did liars loans, that gave up its federal charter to escape our jurisdiction. And I told you about how Roland Arnell became our ambassador to the Netherlands.
Yes.
But that's, in some sense, just politics, right? We're all used to that kind of scum. What was foreshadowed this crisis is two entities rushed to purchase this fraudulent entity, massively fraudulent entity that was a 3-time loser in terms of regulators cracking down on them, including us originally. It was called Ameriquest. And the two entities that rushed to acquire these pervasively fraudulent entity because it wanted these employees working for them were Citicorp and Washington Mutual. Washington Mutual, again, is the one that had the blacklist of appraisers, and Citicorp is notorious for supporting all kinds of frauds, including the Enron and Parmalat frauds as well. But they wanted to acquire thousands of employees whose only claim to fame was that every day when they went to work, they defrauded people, and in particular looked for minorities and the elderly to defraud. That's how sick our most elite financial institutions have become. Many of your listeners probably won't have heard of Washington Mutual, but it was, depending on how you count it, somewhere around the 6th or 8th largest bank in the United States. It's the largest bank failure in U.S. history.
Oh, yeah. And didn't they feed it into Chase?
All of these, that's the other terrible thing we want to emphasize, and that is the systemically dangerous institutions. So one of the reasons that these massive banks are able to defraud with impunity is the government itself is telling us they are so big that as soon as the next one fails, it will cause a global crisis. And there are roughly 20 of them in the United States, large enough that when they fail, and it's a question of when, not if, they will cause a global crisis. So we've made them bigger by allowing already systemically dangerous institutions to acquire massive entities like Washington Mutual, right? And Countrywide. Bank of America acquired Countrywide and Merrill Lynch. This is insane. First, all of these big 20 banks are so big that they're inefficient. In other words, if we cut them down in size dramatically, they would actually be better financial institutions. And they would no longer pose this ticking time bomb that they will cause a global crisis as soon as they next fail, or our only other choice is to bail them out and make them, talk about destroying capitalism. This is the definition of crony capitalism. And of course, the big 20 banks, that also means, they have immense political power. And with the Citizens United decision, they're now able to exploit that power so that finance is the leading political contributor to both of our major parties in the United States. And that dominance is actually larger in many parts of Europe than in the United States, right? Because they have even bigger entities relative to the size of their economies. So I'm not just describing a U.S. dynamic, I'm describing a dynamic that is paralyzed much of Europe.
And as you've pointed out, it's just a question of time when one of these too big to fails and causes a global crisis. How do you see that unfolding?
Well, first, a number of them are insolvent.
Right.
On any real economic basis.
Right.
One of the terrible things in this crisis, again bipartisan, and talk about strange politics and strange bedfellows, the Obama administration, together with the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce hates the Obama administration, and with support signaled from Ben Bernanke, the head of the Federal Reserve, helped create, at the behest of industry, they ginned up a congressional hearing. They brought in the professional auditors that set the accounting standards. It's called the Financial Accounting Standards Board, or FASB. And they put a figurative gun to their head and said, you will either change the rules, accounting rules, so the banks don't have to recognize their losses on these fraudulent assets, or we will remove your standard accounting standards setting authority. And that's the only authority they have. So it was, a mortal blow it would have been to them. And FASB, of course, caved.
Wow.
And changed the accounting rules so that the banks didn't have to recognize the losses, which they largely still haven't. And these faux stress tests that the Federal Reserve, the Geithner ginned up and such. First, all the big failures passed stress tests weeks or months before they failed. Fannie, Freddie, Lehman Brothers, the big three Icelandic banks, all of them passed with flying colors. So stress tests are always a farce. But here, they were ordered to do stress tests in which they ignored the real losses. And in Europe, they were ordered to do stress tests in which they ignored sovereign debt crisis, which of course is the crisis taking down Europe.
Yes.
So they think we're children. They think that they can, not only that they can lie to us, but that they can be really clumsy in their lies. And that we'll just go, oh, okay, well, I guess these banks are healthy now. Wow, what brilliance.
The administration. It's like they don't care if anybody knows.
No, they don't think that we're bright enough to put it together.
No.
Or that we'll do anything. They think that we've lost any capacity for outrage. And indeed, as soon as anyone gets outraged, they say, well, that's terrible. How could you be outraged? That's class warfare. Or you're demonizing bankers. Well, no, just the frauds who are hiding the losses with you helping them to hide the losses. And you're leaving them as systemically dangerous institutions, SDIs, where we're rolling the dice 20 times a day to see when we'll have the next crisis. You people are insane. You're treating us as insane? Europe has this austerity regime. And the European austerity regime is captured very nicely by the poster many people have probably seen, which says, the daily floggings will continue until morale improves around here. Right? Austerity, when you're in a recession or trying to recover from a recession, is the worst possible economic strategy. It, must lead to bad things, and it has put the Eurozone back into recession. So this is insane.
Now, austerity doesn't work. Everybody knows it doesn't work.
No, they don't. No, well, they know, kind of, but they ignore that it doesn't work, and they simply keep asserting. So just as we are doing this interview, Draghi, the head of the European Central Bank, has said only austerity, right? This is the devastating Tina doctrine. There is no alternative.
Well, what about Mario Draghi, president of the European Central Bank? There was a recent interview with him conducted by the Wall Street Journal, isn't that right?
That's correct. Very upset, as his interview made clear, with much of Europe. So he thinks that there are several problems in Europe. One is the social safety net. A second is higher salaries for workers, especially working class people. And the other thing is he really distrusts democracy. So this was the most extraordinary performance in an interview of any central bank head that I've ever read. He just said flat out that the old Europe with any social safety net was dead. Not simply dying, not had to go, it was dead, right? And they had to go forward, and where they had to go forward was to get rid of rigidities, which is code for you had to make it easy to fire workers. And what needed to happen then was to use that ability to fire workers to substantially lower working class wages. Now, Draghi doesn't trust European governments, though, because they are, after all, at least moderately democratic, to produce these results. And so he said that what we really needed was the discipline of the bond markets, in other words, the major financial institutions, to ensure that democracies did the right thing. Now, this is in the context of this massive crisis, which hit worst in Europe, that was designed by the policies of those exact banks, who destroyed themselves instead of applying discipline and had to be bailed out by all of us. And now that we've bailed them out, they aren't supposed to be thankful to us. They are supposed to discipline us and resume their rule over us.
William Black, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank the over 2,000 Italians who ended up coming to this summit. It's one of the remarkable things I've ever witnessed.
There's something happening here. Yeah. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there.
You've been listening to William K. Black. Today's show has been The Greatest Bank Robbery Ever. William Black is Associate Professor of Law and Economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. He is a lawyer, academic, and former bank regulator, and author of The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One: How Corporate Executives and Politicians Looted the S&L Industry. Please visit the University of Missouri, Kansas City New Economic Perspectives blog at www.neweconomicperspectives.org. Visit the website for the first Italian Summit on Modern Money Theory at www.demoкраziammt.info. That's demoкраziammt.info. Guns and Butter is produced by Bonnie Faulkner and Yarrow Mako. To leave comments, order copies of shows, email us at blfaulkner@yahoo.com. That's BLFAULKNER@yahoo.com. Or Faulkner at gunsandbutter.org. Visit our website at